Ladies and gentlemen, respected friends, today I stand before you not as a speaker with all the answers, but as someone who, like each of you, has lived through moments of solitude, heartbreak, and reflection. And as I stand here, I am reminded of a story that begins with a woman who, on the surface, might seem to have it all. She has accomplishments, she has a career, a family, a beautiful home, and all the material things one could wish for. But underneath, there's a different truth, a truth that many of us at times fail to acknowledge. This is the story of a woman with no friends. Not because she doesn't desire them, but because in a world so fast paced, so demanding, she finds herself isolated in ways that are hard to articulate. She doesn't have time to keep up with the calls, the messages, the birthday parties, or the gatherings that people in her life expect her to be a part of. She's so caught up in her own battles, in her own striving, that she forgets to nurture the most important thing, human connection. The art of truly being there for someone, of sharing, of laughing and crying together, these simple acts seem like distant memories, far removed from her daily grind. You see, a woman with no friends is not always a woman who chooses isolation. Sometimes it is the world around her that demands too much. We live in a society that glorifies the individual, the self-made, the strong, the independent. But in this pursuit of success, we forget the truth: no one, no matter how accomplished, can truly thrive alone. Imagine for a moment the courage it takes for this woman to stand up every morning, put on a brave face, and face the world. She might smile, she might laugh, but inside there is a quiet emptiness. The emptiness that comes from not having someone who truly knows her, not just the persona she shows to the world. And it's in these quiet moments that she feels the weight of loneliness, not because she lacks people around her, but because she longs for something deeper, something more authentic. We often mistake popularity for friendship. We measure our worth by the number of people who know our name or the number of people who are there for us when it's convenient. But true friendship, real connection is different. It's about vulnerability. It's about showing up when it's not easy. It's about being there when the world feels heavy and lifting each other up, even when we ourselves are struggling. So, what happens when a woman finds herself without this? Does she crumble? Does she give up? No. She finds strength in her solitude. She learns to be her own best friend. She learns to find joy in her own company, to love herself in ways that the world does not always encourage her to. She learns to take the pain of loneliness and turn it into a catalyst for growth, for self-discovery, for transformation. But while she does that, we, the ones around her, must also reflect. How many of us have been too busy to check in on the woman who always seems fine, who always has it all together? How many of us have assumed that she doesn't need us, may need us, when in fact she might need us the most? This woman with no friends is not a tragedy. She is a warrior, but she is also a reminder to all of us that friendship is a lifeline. We are meant to be in this world together, not apart. We are meant to lift each other, to walk alongside each other, to see one another in our darkest moments and our brightest days. So, let us remember that true friendship is not measured by how often we talk or how close we are physically, but by the depth of our connection, the strength of our support, and the authenticity with which we show up for one another. A woman with no friends does not need pity. She needs understanding. She needs compassion. She needs us to see her, truly see her, and offer her the one thing that can transform her loneliness into strength, the gift of real, genuine, unconditional friendship. A woman with no friends is often seen through the lens of isolation. But the truth is far more complex. In many cases, her solitude is not a choice but a consequence of the world around her. We live in a society that places immense value on productivity, achievement, and self-reliance. Success is often measured by individual milestones, career advancements, financial independence, personal accomplishments. In such a world, emotional connections and social bonds can sometimes become secondary. For many women, this means that while they strive to meet external expectations and fulfill their responsibilities, the deeper need for friendship and connection gets sidelined. Society often places a heavy burden on women, expecting them to balance multiple roles: professionals, caregivers, nurturers, and leaders. Each of these roles demands attention, and when the stakes are high, the focus is on performing, on achieving, on getting things done. Over time, this results in a pattern where relationships, especially friendships, become increasingly difficult to maintain. The demands of life, whether related to work, family, or other responsibilities, consume so much of her time and energy that carving out space for meaningful connections feels impossible. There are so many tasks to juggle, so many things to be done, and so little time left for the emotional labor of sustaining friendships. This is where the misconception often arises that the woman with no friends has somehow chosen this path, that she has actively distanced herself from others. In truth, it's usually a result of the relentless pressure of everyday life. The balance between self-care, career, and maintaining connections becomes a nearly impossible task. When everything feels urgent, when every moment is spoken for, it becomes increasingly easy to justify skipping that coffee date with an old friend or postponing a phone call to catch up. Days slip into weeks and weeks slip into months until the woman realizes that her social circle has gradually diminished, not because she hasn't wanted friends, but because her life simply hasn't allowed for the space needed to nurture those bonds. The irony is that, while these women are often surrounded by people, colleagues, acquaintances, even family, their isolation is palpable. They might attend social events, participate in group activities, or interact in professional settings, but the connections they form are often shallow. The friendships they had in the past may have faded away due to distance or neglect, and the newer ones may not have had the time or emotional investment needed to grow into something more meaningful. What they experience is not a lack of people, but a lack of depth in those relationships. It's a hollow kind of social interaction, where the surface level pleasantries replace the true, vulnerable sharing that is the foundation of deep, lasting friendships. In these moments, the woman with no friends often feels a sense of profound loneliness. This loneliness isn't necessarily about being physically alone. It's the feeling of not being truly seen, of not being understood or supported in the ways that matter most. It's the quiet realization that while she has people in her life, none of them have had the chance to see the real her, the woman beneath the titles, beneath the expectations, beneath the role she plays. And while she may be surrounded by people at work or in social settings, the absence of someone who genuinely knows her heart, her struggles, and her dreams makes the loneliness even more pronounced. It's the kind of loneliness that whispers to her in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world fades away, and she finds herself wondering if anyone truly understands her. In many cases, the woman with no friends also faces a certain degree of guilt. She might wonder if she's done something wrong, if she's failed to invest enough in relationships, or if she's to blame for the distance between herself and others. This guilt is compounded by the fact that we often view friendships through the lens of reciprocity. We are taught that friendships require effort from both sides, and that if someone is distant, it's because the connection isn't being nurtured properly. For the woman with no friends, this expectation can feel like an insurmountable challenge. She might feel as though she's constantly giving, constantly being there for others, but when it comes time to receive support, there is no one in the wings to offer it. The fear of reaching out, of asking for help or companionship, becomes overwhelming. It's easier to remain silent, to endure the isolation, than to admit that she needs someone, because that would require vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like a risk she can't afford. This reality, however, speaks to a deeper issue within the fabric of modern society. We have become so focused on individual achievement that we have forgotten the importance of interdependence, the simple truth that no one succeeds alone. In a world where self-sufficiency is celebrated, we fail to see that real strength lies in connection. We are taught to be strong, to be independent, to have it all together, but these ideals leave little room for the messy, human need for friendship and support. The reality is that we all need each other, no matter how accomplished or self-sufficient we may appear on the outside. And yet, in a world that values individual success above all else, we are more isolated than ever before. Women, in particular, feel this pressure intensely. They are told they must balance everything, handle everything, and do it all without asking for help. As a result, their emotional lives suffer, and the space for true friendship diminishes. The woman with no friends is often caught in a cycle. She feels she must keep moving, must keep achieving, must keep striving to meet everyone's expectations. But in doing so, she loses the very thing that could nourish her spirit: meaningful, deep connections with others. This cycle of busyness, while productive in the material sense, often leads to an inner emptiness that is hard to articulate, even harder to address. It's not a simple matter of having no time. It's a matter of not knowing where to find the energy or emotional space to cultivate the kind of relationships that matter. When everything else demands attention, friendship feels like a luxury she cannot afford. But in truth, it is the very thing that she needs the most. The human need for connection, for understanding, for shared experience is fundamental to emotional well-being. When this need is neglected, loneliness sets in, not because there are no people, but because the people she interacts with do not fulfill this deeper need for connection. A woman with no friends, therefore, is not merely someone who is alone. She is someone who has been left behind by the demands of a world that celebrates individual achievement but neglects the importance of true human connection. She is a reminder that no matter how much we accomplish, no matter how many roles we play, we cannot thrive in isolation. It's a lesson we should all take to heart. In the pursuit of success, particularly in today's fast-paced world, the cost of that success is often far greater than we are willing to acknowledge. A woman's ambition, whether it's in her career, her education, her family life, or her personal development, can often come at the expense of something equally valuable: her emotional well-being and the relationships that support it. This phenomenon is one of the less discussed consequences of the modern world's obsession with achievement. Success is so often framed in terms of tangible accomplishments, financial stability, career milestones, outward validation, that we overlook the hidden toll it can take on a person's ability to foster and maintain meaningful connections. It's easy to understand why this happens. Success, especially in a professional sense, is often celebrated with public accolades, promotions, and the material rewards of hard work. In many fields, there is a clear and straightforward trajectory that marks progress: more hours worked, more tasks completed, more projects executed. Society celebrates the hustle, the drive, the unyielding focus on getting things done. For women, who are frequently expected to balance career ambitions with family life and societal expectations, the pressure to succeed can become all-consuming. It becomes a measuring stick for their worth. The more they achieve, the more they are admired, validated, and respected. It's easy to see why. In this context, success becomes a priority that can overshadow nearly everything else, including friendships and emotional connections. As women pursue their personal or professional goals, they begin to realize that there is a price to pay for that success. The price is not just time, it is also emotional energy, mental bandwidth, and the physical exhaustion that comes with trying to juggle multiple roles and expectations. As the hours dedicated to career growth, family responsibilities, and personal achievements increase, the hours left for nurturing relationships, the late-night conversations, the spontaneous meetups, the phone calls to check in on friends dwindle. The temptation to put off socializing just this once or until things settle down becomes all too familiar. In the process, one realizes that weeks or even months have passed without meaningful interaction with the people who once felt like a support system. The ambitious woman, who is constantly moving forward, suddenly finds herself emotionally disconnected from those around her. This dynamic is not about a lack of desire to maintain friendships. Quite the opposite. Many women wish they had the time to be there for their friends, to support them in the same way they are expected to support their professional or familial roles. But the demands placed on them, the expectation that they must excel in every aspect of their lives, often leaves little room for emotional replenishment. When the external world demands so much, it becomes increasingly difficult to nourish the internal world of relationships and personal connection. Moreover, there's another layer to this reality: the expectation of perfection. Many women face the societal pressure of performing at the highest level in all areas of life. They must be perfect professionals, perfect mothers, perfect daughters, perfect perfect partners. This ideal is propagated by social media, by the stories we tell ourselves about who we should be, and by the fear of being judged or falling short. As they climb the ladder of success, they feel they must appear strong, self-sufficient, and capable at all times. The result is often a carefully curated image, one that hides the vulnerabilities, the doubts, and the quiet exhaustion that comes with it all. In this context, friendships that require emotional vulnerability, true, raw, unpolished connections become difficult to maintain. The fear of being seen as weak or not having everything together can make it difficult to reach out to others for support, even if they long for that very thing. The result is isolation, even within a sea of professional success. In addition to the outward pressure to perform, there's the more subtle but equally insidious internal pressure that women place on themselves. This is the belief that if they don't succeed in all areas of their lives, they are somehow less valuable or less competent. In the pursuit of perfection, women may even subconsciously cut themselves off from the very relationships that could help them succeed in the first place. Friendship requires time, emotional availability, and often an exchange of energy. It requires showing up for others, being there not just when things are going well, but especially when things are tough. But when every moment is accounted for and success is defined solely by external markers such as promotions, accolades, or achievements, there's little room for the less measurable, but equally important aspects of life: emotional intimacy, shared vulnerability, and mutual care. As this woman pours her energy into one area of her life, it becomes more and more difficult to reconcile the fact that something has to give. This isn't a matter of choice, it's simply the law of diminishing returns. At some point, a woman may find that she is burning out, not because she hasn't worked hard enough, but because she has neglected the very relationships that fuel her resilience and sense of belonging. In the pursuit of career goals or other achievements, the emotional drain becomes undeniable. She may even begin to feel resentful of the very success she's worked so hard for, realizing that it has come at the expense of the friendships and deep connections that once brought her comfort and joy. This is where the question arises: is success worth the cost of emotional isolation? The answer is not always clear-cut, but the question itself speaks to the deeper truth that we cannot truly thrive in a vacuum. No matter how much a person achieves professionally or materially, the human need for companionship, understanding, and emotional support remains unyielding. True success is not just about what one accomplishes in the world, it's also about the depth and quality of the relationships that ground them. For a woman who has sacrificed her friendships in the name of success, the realization of this loss often comes too late. The absence of close friends becomes glaringly obvious when she faces difficult times, when there is no one to lean on during a personal crisis, no one to help her shoulder the burden when the weight of everything becomes too much to carry alone. This is the hidden cost of success. It can isolate, it can alienate, and it can erode the support systems that are essential for emotional survival. The irony is that the very things that contribute to professional or personal success, hard work, determination, and a drive for excellence, are often the same qualities that, when not balanced with emotional connection, can lead to a deep sense of loneliness. Success, in the conventional sense, is often seen as an individual pursuit. But the truth is that success in its most fulfilling form is always shared. It's the people who stand beside us in moments of triumph and failure, who remind us of who we are when we've lost sight of ourselves, who celebrate our victories and help us weather our defeats, that make the journey worthwhile. Success in its truest sense is about connection. When that connection is lost in the chase for individual achievement, the cost becomes painfully clear. For women who find themselves in this cycle, there is an opportunity to pause, reflect, and recalibrate. The pursuit of success is not inherently bad, but it must be balanced with the understanding that success without connection is incomplete. Relationships are not a luxury, they are a necessity. When a woman achieves success without nurturing the bonds that ground her, she is left with an emptiness that no amount of achievement can fill. In our society, there's a prevailing narrative that equates popularity with true friendship. We are constantly told that the number of people in our social circles, the number of followers we have, or the number of invitations we receive to social gatherings is a measure of our value as a person. However, this oversimplified view fails to distinguish between the quantity of relationships and the quality of those relationships. True friendship goes beyond the superficiality of popularity. It's not about how many people know your name, but about how deeply those who do truly understand and care for you. Popularity might give the appearance of a vibrant social life, but true friendship is about connection, vulnerability, and mutual respect, things that can't be measured by the number of people who surround us. Popularity often operates on a surface level. It thrives in environments where visibility is more important than substance. For instance, in the age of social media, people can accumulate thousands of likes, comments, and followers without ever establishing a real, meaningful relationship with anyone. We see this with influencers, celebrities, and public figures who may be adored by millions but often feel a profound sense of isolation in their personal lives. The public may see these individuals as surrounded by friends, yet they might spend their quiet moments realizing that these friendships lack the depth needed to truly nourish their emotional and mental well-being. A similar dynamic exists in everyday life. A woman might have a large number of acquaintances, colleagues, or people who know her on some level, but that doesn't automatically mean she has deep, meaningful friendships. She may be invited to parties, dinners, or social events, but these gatherings might be more about networking or maintaining a public image than about sharing and connecting on a deeper level. In fact, many of these friendships are fleeting and transactional. When someone needs help or support, those superficial connections often fade away, leaving the person feeling alone, despite being surrounded by people. This is the unfortunate truth about popularity. It can sometimes lead to a deeper loneliness. True friendship, on the other hand, is built on vulnerability and authenticity. It is about sharing your true self, the parts that are messy, complicated, and sometimes painful, and knowing that your friend will accept you without judgment. In contrast to the shallow interactions that may accompany popularity, true friends engage with each other on a profound emotional level. They listen without judgment, offer support without expectation, and make space for each other's fears, dreams, and insecurities. These friendships don't need to be flashy or publicly acknowledged. They thrive in quiet moments when two people are simply present with each other in ways that are deeply meaningful. In true friendship, the focus is not on appearances but on the connection between two people. For a woman with no real friends, this distinction can be painfully clear. She may be surrounded by people, may be invited to events, and may even have a large social media following, but when it comes to the moments that truly matter, the moments of personal crisis, the moments of vulnerability, there is no one there to turn to. The absence of deep friendship is particularly felt when life presents challenges. During difficult times, a woman might reach out, only to find that her so-called friends are either unavailable or uninterested in offering support. This is the reality of popularity. Without depth, it lacks the foundation necessary to withstand the weight of personal hardship. True friendship, however, is built for those moments. It is in these times of struggle that the true value of a friendship is revealed. A true friend doesn't simply show up for the good times, they show up when it's difficult, when it's uncomfortable, and when it's inconvenient. They're there to listen, to comfort, to support, and to offer their presence in a way that makes the other person feel seen and heard. Popularity, on the other hand, is often transactional in nature. It's about what can be gained in the moment, whether that's visibility, status, or social capital. But when things get tough, the transactional nature of these relationships becomes apparent. A woman with no friends may at first glance seem to have everything under control. She is strong, capable, and resilient, handling life's many demands with grace and determination. She shows up every day, whether for work, for family, or for any number of responsibilities, and she does so without faltering. She may even be admired by those around her for her ability to manage so much, often all by herself. But beneath the surface of this composed exterior lies a truth that many may not see. Strength in solitude is not always a choice, and it is not always empowering. For many women, the courage it takes to face each day alone emotionally, socially, and even physically is a hard-earned strength born not out of desire, but out of necessity. This woman learns to be her own best friend because at some point she's had to. In a world that often places immense expectations on women, whether as caretakers, professionals, or community pillars, there can be little room left for emotional nourishment or genuine connection. The reality is that true companionship requires time, effort, and emotional vulnerability, and when a woman is constantly juggling responsibilities or dealing with pressures that demand her attention, these emotional needs tend to be pushed aside. The moments for shared laughter, for quiet conversations with close friends, or for receiving support during tough times seem to slip further and further out of reach. At some point, the absence of meaningful relationships becomes glaringly apparent. She may look around and find that Despite being surrounded by people, no one really knows her, at least, not the deepest parts of who she is. While she may be capable of caring for others, offering advice, or supporting those around her, there is no one who offers that same level of understanding in return. Her social circle may consist of acquaintances, colleagues, or even family members, but the emotional intimacy required for true friendship is missing. The kind of friendship that doesn't require putting on a facade, the kind that accepts the messiness of life, is the one that she lacks. In a way, she becomes accustomed to walking alone emotionally. This learned solitude is not an act of preference, nor is it the result of a lack of desire for friends. It is often a survival mechanism. She becomes her own source of strength because over time she has learned that relying on others for emotional support can be unpredictable. Perhaps she has been let down by people in the past, or perhaps she has witnessed others who are too busy, too preoccupied, or too caught up in their own lives to truly be there for her. There's a certain weariness that builds over time when it feels like no matter how much she gives, no one is willing or able to meet her needs in return. Eventually, she stops reaching out, stops expecting others to fill the void, and instead starts filling it herself. Being her own best friend doesn't mean that she's emotionally detached or that she's given up on meaningful connections altogether. It's more about learning to rely on herself when others are not there. She has to become her own source of comfort when things go wrong, her own cheerleader when she needs encouragement, and her own therapist when she needs someone to talk to. This type of self-sufficiency can be empowering on the surface. After all, being able to navigate life without needing constant validation or support from others is a strength in many ways. But there's also a cost to this. Over time, the emotional burden becomes heavier. It's exhausting to be both the caretaker and the person who needs care. It's draining to be the one who holds it all together without anyone to lean on when the weight becomes too much. This emotional labor can be particularly intense because women are often socialized to be strong and self-reliant, to meet the needs of others without expecting anything in return. From a young age, women are taught to prioritize the well-being of others, often at the expense of their own. They are expected to be the caregivers, the nurturers, the listeners. These roles, while rewarding in many ways, can leave little room for their own emotional needs to be met. The result is a pattern of overgiving without receiving, of being everything to everyone except themselves. When there's no space left for their own vulnerability, no outlet for their own emotions, they begin to shoulder the weight of everything alone. Over time, the strength required to carry this load becomes part of their identity. They learn to suppress their own emotional needs, convincing themselves that they are better off without help, or that asking for support is a sign of weakness. This isn't always a conscious decision, it often happens gradually. When a woman has been continuously strong and independent, it becomes harder to admit that she needs someone, that she is struggling. It is easier to convince herself that she is better off taking care of everything herself, even when that isn't true. And while this may work for a while, it's an unsustainable cycle. Emotional burnout is inevitable when the emotional resources available to a person are constantly being drained without replenishment. Eventually, the woman who has become her own best friend begins to feel the weight of that solitude, even though she might have once prided herself on her independence. The isolation that comes from being your own best friend can also lead to a deep sense of loneliness. This loneliness is not always about being physically alone, but about feeling unseen and unheard in the places that matter most. It's the quiet feeling of emptiness that arises when no one truly knows what's happening beneath the surface. It's the longing for someone to share in the ups and downs of life, to be there not just in the big moments, but in the small, quiet moments that often go unnoticed by others. It's the desire for someone who will listen, without judgment, to the things that are too hard to say aloud. This loneliness, while often hidden behind a smile, can be deeply painful. It's the silent ache that accompanies the realization that despite all the external success and accomplishments, there is no one who shares in the joy and sorrow of life's journey in a truly intimate way. And it's this kind of loneliness that is hardest to bear because it's the type of isolation that leaves a person questioning their worth. If no one is around to share in the emotional weight of life, it can be easy to begin wondering if something is wrong with them, or if they are too difficult to befriend. These thoughts, compounded over time, can lead to feelings of inadequacy, of believing that they are not deserving of connection or love. Despite all of this, a woman with no friends often remains strong. She doesn't allow the absence of deep connections to define her. Instead, she uses it as a source of personal growth. She may become more self-reflective, more introspective, and more attuned to her own needs and desires. She learns to fill the emotional gaps on her own, becoming her own emotional anchor. This resilience, while admirable, comes at a high emotional cost, and it's important to acknowledge that even the strongest individuals need help from time to time. The process of learning to be her own best friend is an act of survival. But it's also a reminder that true strength is not about being able to do everything alone. It's about recognizing when to lean on others and when to seek the support that everyone, no matter how strong, needs to thrive. The idea of a woman being without friends often brings to mind an image of someone who is lonely, disconnected, or perhaps even socially inept. But this narrative overlooks the many complex reasons a woman might find herself without close friendships, and it fails to acknowledge that a woman without friends is not necessarily someone who is lacking in social skills or companionship. Sometimes the absence of friends is not a reflection of personal inadequacy, but a consequence of the choices, circumstances, and internal battles that shape her life. Being a woman without friends can sometimes be a direct result of the immense pressures placed on women to balance so many aspects of life and to prioritize others over themselves. It is important to recognize that for some, the experience of living without close friends is not an isolated negative experience, but rather a reflection of the complexities of the world in which they live. A woman without friends may have become accustomed to the idea that she must prioritize everything else in her life over social relationships. From an early age, women are taught that they are caretakers of children, of partners, of family, of friends. These roles are ingrained in us by society, by culture, and by history. The responsibility to nurture, to take care, and to support is often placed on women's shoulders without question. As a result, many women grow up learning to give of themselves to others without necessarily learning to care for themselves in the same way. When life becomes a series of obligations, a woman's personal relationships can be pushed to the back burner, sometimes for years, as she tends to everything and everyone around her. This constant care for others often comes at the expense of her emotional health and ultimately her friendships. When a woman is continually pouring herself into these other areas of life, be it work, family, or social expectations, there may be little to no energy left for friendships. Relationships take time, effort, and emotional investment, and when a woman is already stretched thin by competing demands, she may feel that she just doesn't have the capacity to nurture friendships in the way that others expect. She might realize that she no longer has the emotional space to listen to a friend's troubles or to make time for a cup of coffee with someone she used to connect with regularly. In these moments, the absence of friends isn't about rejection or indifference, it's simply a result of the depletion of her own emotional resources. She becomes isolated not because she is unwilling to make connections, but because she is physically and emotionally exhausted from giving so much to others. This depletion is exacerbated by the societal expectation that women should be perfect in all aspects of their lives. A woman might be a devoted mother, an ambitious professional, and a loving partner, but when it comes to maintaining friendships, there may be a sense that she has fallen short. There is a pervasive idea that being a good woman means always being available for others and always putting their needs before your own. However, this often leads to an overwhelming sense of burnout and emotional fatigue. In the midst of fulfilling all the roles that society expects of her, a woman might find herself feeling unworthy of the time and energy required to maintain close friendships. She may begin to believe that she doesn't deserve the nurturing and support that friendships offer simply because there is always something else that takes precedence. For many women, loneliness can arise not from the lack of social interaction, but from the lack of emotional connection. While it's entirely possible to be surrounded by people and still feel completely alone, it's even more difficult when you've been conditioned to hide your emotional needs. A woman who finds herself without friends may feel like she's constantly performing. She is constantly presenting a version of herself that is strong, competent, and capable, often at the expense of showing vulnerability. The fear of appearing weak or needy can prevent a woman from reaching out to others for companionship or support. In a world that often expects women to be self-sufficient, asking for help can feel like a failure, even when it's clear that she's in need of connection. The result is an internal conflict. She wants to reach out, but the fear of rejection or the discomfort of being seen as too much holds her back. The feeling of being constantly on can be particularly isolating for women in leadership roles or high-stress careers where they are expected to perform at their best every day. They may find that their professional lives leave little room for emotional downtime, and when they do try to form friendships, they often feel that they cannot show their true selves. The absence of friends in a woman's life often carries with it an unspoken weight, a burden that is not always visible to the outside world. People around her might see her going about her day-to-day life, handling responsibilities, maintaining a composed appearance, and performing at a high level, yet they don't know the deeper emotional landscape she navigates. The silence of her solitude may not always be deafening, but it can be felt in the quiet moments, in the spaces where support is needed but absent, and in the absence of genuine connection. For many women, the experience of having no real friends is not a choice, but rather the result of complex factors that include societal pressures, personal history, and the very nature of friendship itself. From a young age, women are often conditioned to prioritize the needs of others, whether family, friends, or society, over their own. They are taught to be nurturing, kind, and attentive, qualities that are widely celebrated and expected of them. However, what is often left out of this narrative is the importance of nurturing themselves. When a woman focuses so much of her energy on meeting the emotional and practical needs of others, her own needs are frequently neglected. The idea of putting others first becomes ingrained, and over time, the woman may lose touch with her own desires, her emotional vulnerabilities, and ultimately, her ability to cultivate meaningful relationships. This pattern can be particularly challenging for women who are high achievers or those in positions of responsibility, whether in their personal or professional lives. A woman who excels at her job, manages a household, or cares for others may find that the more she gives, the less she receives in return. She may end up feeling overwhelmed by the weight of her own responsibilities, and the emotional labor required to maintain friendships may feel like just another task on her already crowded to-do list. She might begin to distance herself from her own emotional needs because there's simply no time or energy left to address them. The resulting emotional isolation can be subtle, a gradual erosion of social bonds that leaves her wondering why her friendships no longer feel as fulfilling as they once did. Moreover, the demands placed on women's time and emotional resources often leave little room for the vulnerability necessary to form deep, lasting connections. Friendship, in its most meaningful form, requires vulnerability, the willingness to be seen, to share both the highs and the lows, and to offer support in return. But for many women, showing vulnerability can feel like a luxury they cannot afford. Vulnerability requires trust, and trust is difficult to establish when a woman feels that she cannot show weakness or rely on others for emotional support. This fear of being judged or of appearing too needy often prevents women from allowing themselves the kind of emotional closeness that forms the foundation of genuine friendships. Over time, this fear can cause her to withdraw, even from those she considers potential friends, because opening up feels too risky. This internal conflict is compounded by the way society often values women's social lives. In many cultures, women are expected to have close-knit, supportive friendships that are visible and performative, celebrated through social media posts, shared moments of joy, and public displays of connection. These external markers of friendship often come with an unspoken pressure to maintain an idealized version of friendship that doesn't necessarily reflect the realities of individual lives. For a woman who is struggling with feelings of loneliness or isolation, this can lead to a sense of inadequacy. She might see other women sharing moments of intimacy and camaraderie and wonder why she isn't experiencing the same. The social comparison becomes a silent ache, a reminder of the friendships she yearns for but cannot seem to nurture. At the same time, the experience of having no friends can also reflect a deeper understanding of what friendship truly means. The absence of close friends doesn't necessarily mean a woman is emotionally stunted or unable to form meaningful connections. Rather, it can indicate that she has become more discerning about the relationships she chooses to invest in. Over time, a woman might begin to realize that friendship isn't just about filling a social need, but about deep mutual understanding and emotional reciprocity. She may have experienced superficial friendships in the past, relationships that were more about social status, convenience, or external appearances than genuine connection. These types of friendships, while they may offer temporary comfort, often leave her feeling empty because they lack the depth and authenticity that are needed for true emotional intimacy. For some women, the absence of friends is a direct response to these kinds of superficial relationships. They may become disillusioned by the idea of friendship itself and withdraw as a way of protecting themselves from further disappointment. The pain of investing in relationships that ultimately don't fulfill her emotional needs can make her hesitant to try again. She might begin to question her own worth or wonder if she is simply not capable of forming the kinds of connections that others seem to have with ease. This sense of disillusionment with friendships can be isolating, and over time it can lead to a state of emotional withdrawal where she relies solely on herself for support, comfort, and validation. However, this withdrawal doesn't mean that the woman is necessarily unhappy or unfulfilled. There is a unique form of strength that comes with learning to navigate life without the support of close friends. This strength is not about denying the need for connection, but rather about becoming resilient in the face of isolation. A woman who has learned to thrive without a close-knit group of friends may find that she is more self-sufficient and introspective than she would have been if she had relied on others to meet her emotional needs. She may develop a deep sense of independence, learning to rely on her own resources, whether through hobbies, personal growth, or introspection, to fulfill the emotional space that friendships typically occupy. Still, this independence can come at a price. The lack of close friends means that there is no one to share in the day-to-day emotional experiences, the joys, the struggles, the small victories, and the frustrations. A woman without friends may find herself celebrating her successes in solitude, without someone to genuinely cheer her on or to reflect back her feelings. The absence of that reflective companionship can lead to a feeling of disconnection, as though the important moments of life are experienced in isolation without the shared bond of friendship. In these instances, the value of close friends becomes more apparent, not just for the support they offer, but for the joy of experiencing life's moments together. Even though friendships are often seen as essential to a fulfilling life, the reality is that not everyone has access to the deep, meaningful friendships they desire. For some women, the absence of close friends may be a temporary phase, one that can be transformed through personal growth, changes in circumstances, or new experiences. For others, it may be a more permanent state, one that requires a shift in perspective. In either case, the woman without friends is not necessarily a failure, nor does she lack value. Her journey, as painful as it may be at times, is her own, and the strength she draws from navigating this path can be profound. The emotional landscape of a woman without friends is complex, filled with both vulnerability and resilience. She may experience loneliness, but she also learns to navigate life without relying on others to define her worth or happiness. It's a quiet strength, one that may not always be visible to the outside world, but one that is deeply felt within. Through the absence of friends, a woman may find a deeper connection with herself, an understanding of her own needs, and a recognition that while friends can bring immense value to one's life, the most important relationship is often the one we have with ourselves.